So special illustration rares have made quite a difference when it comes to Pokemon cards, and some certain special illustration rares have climbed quite steadily in value. The Pokemon market has seen some pretty incredible market highs, and it's also seen some low points. I mean, one memory of a time when the market wasn't doing so well was back in late 2023, when the market really cooled off and we saw some prices fall heavily in value. Though these days it just feels like anybody's game, and I do think special illustration rares will become iconic in the future as they are so unique within the era. Now I'll go over which SIRs I think will become the most popular once Generation 9 ends. Though I suppose Pokemon cards have really changed over the years, right? If we look at vintage cards, there's something so innocent about them, right? They feel kind of unpolished, but they have a certain charm about them, right? I mean, when we compare a vintage Blastoise versus a SIR Blastoise, you can see how much Pokemon cards have evolved. And one question I really wonder is, how can Pokemon top special illustration rares? They almost feel like the end game for how well Pokemon cards can be created, as they are even a level above alt art. Though, you know what, I actually am sure that Pokemon will be able to top it. They always somehow do. Also, I just want to say, if you're new to the channel, hi and welcome. My name's Phil. I am a marketing professional who uses some of my years of experience in marketing and apply it to the world of collectibles. If you love Pokemon cards and the general market, please feel free to subscribe. It's always awesome to see new faces on board. Now, the market of special illustration rares is always interesting, right? And check out what we're dealing with at the moment. I think it's really, really weird. Now, moving on to the Umbreon, or the new Sunbreon, and a lot of people don't like it when it's called Sunbreon, which kind of makes sense because it's not actually a sun behind it, because Espeon is far more kind of linked with the sun and Umbreon isn't. But nonetheless, you know, that's kind of the name that a lot of people have given it. But if we look at this Umbreon card, right, it has performed pretty wild. And I did speak about this previously, though. It's so interesting that it's getting this price point. If you can see, this Umbreon right now is selling for $1,580 raw. I think that's really ridiculous pricing. And the reason why I think that's ridiculous pricing is because when we look at Moonbreon took so many years to get to this same price point. Now, Moonbreon is a little bit more expensive, but still it made sense because it had so many years to kind of bake into that, right? It took such a long time for it to get to that price point. This Umbreon has just kind of come out the floodgates and decided it's going to be on the same level, which I think is a little bit too quick, too soon. But nonetheless, we're going to see where this card kind of ends up. When we look at the Japanese version, that's also had a price drop. So here we are, we have the Terrestrial Festivals Umbreon, and you can see this card kind of started at $365, went down to $290, ballooned up to $466, and right now selling for $365. If we go into the last month, you can see it is slowly going down and it's kind of leveling out. I still think, you know, $366 is pretty good pricing for this card. But then again, don't forget that Terrestrial Festival has that kind of guaranteed SAR in every box. So pretty much, you know, there's always going to be one box that has SARs in it. But then again, there is 32 special art rares. So it is very difficult to get this card. But nonetheless, I do think that that price point is a bit more realistic and more attainable for a lot of people. And I don't see any reason why not to buy the Japanese card. Now, while speaking about Terrestrial Festival prices and Japanese products, it's actually a good time to speak about the sponsor of today's video, which is the Benos store. So if you're looking at purchasing some Japanese Pokemon cards or products, the Benos store on Mercari US lets you shop for unique or discounted Japanese items. So the Benos store connects US shoppers to the largest marketplace app in Japan, which is Mercari Japan. Here you actually have access to thousands of listings from Japanese sellers and offering a massive variety of unique or discounted items. So you can search something specific here and use keywords such as Pokemon cards and see what's available. Now, finding the Benos store on Mercari US is super easy. All you need to do when you're on Mercari US is use the search filter and set the origin filter to Japan to see listings from the Benos store. So if you've been wanting to get unique or discounted Japanese items, the Benos store on Mercari US becomes incredibly useful. Feel free to learn more about Benos and check out the store. All the details are in the description of this video. We've got the Zapdos from Pokemon 151. Some really weird market movements with 151 singles. Because of Blooming Waters, I actually anticipated that a lot of the 151 singles would be slightly calming down in value, but obviously not. It's actually had no real effect on the market. So when Crown Zenith, Sea, and Sky boxes came out, we actually did see singles really crash heavily in value. But with 151 and Blooming Waters, and as much as it's come out and all these people are trying to get it and all this, the singles actually haven't dipped as much as I expected. So check this out with the Zapdos, right? We can see this one in the last 3 months. It was selling for 46 USD, went all the way up to 66 USD, dropped slightly down to 58, and right now sitting at around 63. Now, if I pull this in the year graph, you can actually see the journey that Zapdos has had. If we go all the way back to February of last year, it was selling for 37 USD. So from $37 all the way up to 63. Now, some cards during this period have done way more. Like if we look at Bubble Mew, that's gone from 75 USD to 400 USD. Whereas this Zapdos has had just a little bit under double increase, right? Though it's very interesting and telling of the times that nearly all cards are rising. I still actually think this Zapdos is fairly priced because the artwork is really, really unique. And I think it also does include all three with Moltres and Articuno, and we've also seen how cards with all three of them have performed, so it's going to be cool to see where this card goes in the future. Now, another interesting one is the Kingdra Shrouded Fable promo. Now, this is such a gorgeous artwork. I actually spoke really highly about this, and I did make a video talking about the 10 best modern promo cards for Pokemon, and this did make that list in a very high spot. I really rate this artwork along with the Greninja, which I'm about to get into in a second. But talking about the Kingdra right now, check this out, man. When it released, around $8 mark, right? You know, sitting at $8.50. You can kind of see that it's had a bit of a weird journey, sitting at $7 to $9, right? And then just out of nowhere in December, went from $9.30 and spiked all the way up to $28. And right now, this card's selling for 24 USD. I mean, if you didn't know how these cards were obtained, they were pretty much gifted to you in a little collection box for Shrouded Fable. Now also, don't forget that these cards also have a very expensive PSA 10 rate as well, because when you actually pull these promo cards outside of the plastic packaging, it's very common for the tiniest little dents and all this and whitening on the sides, and it's very more likely to score PSA 8s or PSA 9s with these, right? To get PSA 10s out of promo cards is very, very difficult, and that's why the PSA 10 for this card has a huge premium. So you can see with the Greninja as well, this one's also had some pretty big market movement. If we pull this into the last 6 months, you can actually see how this card kind of started its journey, right? Sitting at $11, which is pretty expensive for a promo card, because if you did buy the Greninja Shrouded Fable promo box, you pretty much already had an $11 card straight out of the gate, and you can see that's what it was selling for. But check this out, man. Hit a high of $40. That is such a big price increase for a promo. And, you know, it is telling because these artworks are very unique. If you do look at the Kingdra and the Greninja promo cards, we've never really seen artworks like that in history for Pokemon. They are so unique, and it's actually really ironic because when Shrouded Fable came out, a lot of people didn't like Shrouded Fable, but people were obsessed with these promos. And it is funny that, you know, arguably one of the more weaker sets of the Scarlet and Violet era has probably the best promos of the Scarlet and Violet era. So it's pretty funny, but you can see right now it's gone down to $33. I still think that is quite expensive for a card that you could get pretty much gifted to you, but nonetheless, it is because the market has decided that everyone loves these cards. We've had the influx of people coming into Pokemon. A lot of people are really valuing these promos at the moment. Now, interestingly, we also have the Van Gogh Pikachu. If we pull this into the year graph as well, we can see how this has traveled. When this card, you know, last year selling for $89, you know, $85, even $96. If you look at the price increase right now, it's selling for $317. Now, this card actually really surprised me in a lot of ways because I didn't think it would perform this way, but now in hindsight, I probably should have known better because these artwork crossover cards always tend to perform pretty well, right? And we can kind of see that with this promo card as well, selling for $317. But don't forget, the PSA 10 population of this card is astronomical, man. There are so many in the wild, so it's going to be really interesting to see the future for this because there is a lot of PSA 10s of this card. It is not that hard to get a PSA 10 in it either, so we're going to have to see what the future holds for this card. Moving along, we have the Iron Valiant. Now, the Iron Valiant was selling for around $20 in November. Then you you can see it climbed all the way to $33, and now it's selling still for around $33. Now, this Iron Valiant is such a unique artwork, and I do think it's probably one of the more undervalued special illustration rares. But don't forget, man, Paradox Rift is getting harder and harder to find, and Paradox Rift is climbing in value. Though it's interesting that the special illustration rares don't really compete with, Groudon, which is the illustration rare, which is the most desired card from Paradox Rift. We've seen the Garchomp kind of increase in price. I am wondering whether or not this Iron Valiant will also get its time in the sun as more and more people kind of reflect on Paradox Rift and decide if it's a good set or not. So moving on to the Miraidon from Scarlet and Violet base, we can also see in the last year, this has also had a pretty interesting journey. Selling at 15 USD, went all the way up to 23 USD in June, and then fell all the way back to 14 USD. And right now it's back at that $23 range. Still hasn't surpassed that previous high, but it's going to be weird because Scarlet and Violet base is getting harder and harder to find in the wild, and base sets usually perform pretty well. Base sets are never the most expensive of a generation. I mean, in generation 1 it was, but really afterwards it wasn't ever that base sets were the most desired. It's usually later sets on. So it's going to be interesting how this card goes in the future, and same with the Koraidon, right? When we look at the Koraidon, you can see in the last 3 months this has been going up in value from $11 in November, selling for $18 now. Not a huge price increase in terms of dollar amount, but it is a big price increase in percentage amount, and it is going to be interesting if Scarlet and Violet gets very hard to find and base set becomes incredibly expensive. What are the prices of some of these singles going to be? Now, also as well, while talking about the Miraidon and the Koraidon, I actually am going live to celebrate 40,000 subscribers, and I'm giving away 50 packs of Scarlet and Violet base. The live stream will be on Wednesday, 26th of February at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Can't wait to see you all there. Get excited. The server invite for my Discord is in the description of this video. So moving on, we can also see some more 151 singles. The Charizard from 151 is also going up in value. Last 3 months, selling for $195 in November, and you can see it's now selling for $257. Blooming Waters has had actually no effect on this card's price, which is interesting because so much more stock has come into the world, but then again, it's now selling for $257. Now, Blooming Waters, yes, there is a lot of stock out there, but the problem is the scalping is just off the charts. It really makes you wonder, when is this going to calm down? But if we pull this into the whole year so we can get an overview, you can see, just looking at that graph, what an incredible price increase Charizard has had. If we pull this here, you can see it was selling for $115 last year, right now selling for $247, pretty much more than double in price. It's going to be interesting to see where this Charizard ends up as the years go on, because Charizard is one of those Pokemon. It's that guy, man. Everyone loves Charizard cards. If it gets released as a chase card, you can bet your bottom dollar that Charizard will be heavily desired. Moving forward to the Blastoise, you can also see Blastoise has had an interesting price increase, $66 in November, currently selling for $82. And once again, you can see Blooming Waters hasn't had any effect on the singles, which is really bizarre, okay? A lot of people who invest in collectibles, usually how it happens when a reprint or restocks happen, the singles are the first one to go down on the chopping block, but this hasn't been the case whatsoever. Same thing with the Venusaur. We can see it's also had that kind of price increase. $65 in November, and right now selling for $83. It's still going up, and I think a lot of people are playing catch up with these cards, and they want them in their collections. Now, another one that's interesting is the Raging Bolt special illustration rare from Temporal Forces. If we go and look at the whole overview, this card went all the way up to $76, then dropped down to $49, moved up to $99, and then went all the way down to $68, and right now it's selling for around $98, so it's still around that previous high point, right? It's kind of matched it. I am going to be interested to see where this Raging Bolt ends up, because Temporal Forces is still pretty available. It's actually one of the more available sets, right? What's going to be really interesting to see is when Temporal Forces gets harder and harder to find, how are these special illustration rares going to go in price? Now, as I was saying, the Pokemon market has changed, right? Those special illustration rares have certainly made a noticeable difference within the Pokemon economy. I think one that will really make noise for years to come is the Bubble Mew. Though these artworks can always change, and it does bring up a question of how long can Pokemon cards continue to climb in value? Well, I actually think not that much longer, and I explain what I mean right within this video here. Within this video, I go over the turbulent Pokemon market and explain why some of the hype and trends will eventually calm down. Click that video on screen to learn more about it there, and I'll see you there.